when you're new to lifting, you're going to get a certain amount of muscle gain and fat loss at the same time. However, the more advanced you get, the harder it is to achieve both at the same time to any measurable degree. And when it's very hard to measure something, it's very hard to manage for it. And then it's very hard to stay motivated.
Welcome to the Wits and Weights podcast. I'm your host, Philip Pape, and this twice-a-week podcast is dedicated to helping you achieve physical self-mastery by getting stronger, optimizing your nutrition, and upgrading your body composition. We'll uncover science-backed strategies for movement, metabolism, muscle, and mindset with a skeptical eye on the fitness industry so you can look and feel your absolute best. Let's dive right in. Wits and Weights community, welcome to another episode of the Wits and Weights podcast. Today, I'm honored to sit down with none other than Andy Morgan, the passionate, knowledgeable, and well-muscled force behind RippedBody.com. Originally from the UK, but living in Tokyo, Andy's carved out a very clear path in the crowded world of fitness, and I've learned a ton from his books and online content, which is why I had to invite him on the show. Today, you'll learn about Andy's experiences, his no-nonsense approach to fitness communication, and his thoughts on training, muscle building, and fat loss phases, and maybe some related topics like body fat percentage, scale weight fluctuations, and challenges during fat loss. Andy will also share his insights on the fitness industry using data and principles to get results. Andy Morgan is a fitness coach, author, and entrepreneur who has been helping people achieve their physique goals for over a decade. He works with busy working professional men who are recreational, physique-focused trainees, and he uses a simple but data-driven, effective approach with them. In addition to his website, RippedBody.com, he co-authored the hugely popular Muscle and Strength Pyramids and wrote the Diet Adjustments Manual for eliminating guesswork during cuts and bulks. What I really appreciate about his content is how he simplifies complex concepts, but uses data to back everything up while calling out the nonsense in the fitness industry with a healthy level of skepticism. Andy, it is a pleasure, man, to welcome you to the show.
Philippe, thank you. Honored to be on. And frankly, I would love to hire you to walk into every room 30 seconds before I walk into that room, just to announce to people quite who is walking in. I didn't realize how important and special I am, and now I do. And, I've got all those warm, fuzzy feels.
That's what I wanted, man. I wanted that warm, fuzzy feeling with you to really break the ice. And it's funny because we were talking about the intros to the podcast beforehand. Some people read them live, some people record them. And I learned years ago when trying to do speeches with people how important it was to introduce them live. And so I like to carry that spirit into a podcast.
Yeah, you make a good point there. I am currently on a break from my pod, but I think it works super well. And I'm going to switch to that style as well. Actually, there's a couple of things that I've picked up from listening to your podcast that I'm like, yeah, that works better.
Really?
Yes, absolutely.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
That's great. All right. Because I'm telling people, man, that I've kind of been idolizing you for a bit since I got into your work years ago. And I invited you on. I'm like, I got to have Andy on. That'd be awesome. And so that makes me feel warm and fuzzy, by the way. So here we go. It's a love fest on the show. All right. So speaking of, one of the things that appeals to me about you and how you communicate is you get right to the point. And I think the first time I was exposed to your work was it used to be called The Last Shred, right? And now it's the Diet Adjustments Manual. I had it on Kindle or something back in the day. And I had no idea how to control my results. And some of the stuff you broke down very simply: do this, here are the steps, here's some stick figures that explain who you are, and here's some graphs that tell you how it works. People overcomplicate things all the time, right? And that was refreshingly the opposite. So how did you get to this point and develop that unique style that you have?
That's quite a tricky question. Well, ultimately, I've always been writing for myself. But at this point, my early 20s self, it's the stuff that I wish I knew, written in a way that would have resonated with me. And now, as I've gotten older, the way that would have resonated with me, the language has changed slightly. But it's always been about trying to simplify and save myself from the vast amounts of nonsense out there in the fitness industry. So I want people to stumble across the website and feel home. Wonderful. Someone who's not just trying to trick me out of my money. Someone who doesn't have a little supplement sell at the end. Now, I'm not saying that all supplements are nonsense, but the vast majority are. And so if I was to start selling one, then all of a sudden you're going to question my credibility for all of them. So I don't. And, you know, they can read the website. Yes, they could purchase a book if they want to get pretty much what is on the website, but in a more organized fashion. And that would be worth their time and money. And a lot of people feel so, but it's all free. All the results are here from different clients over the years. And then if these are the client results that I have, then obviously they can imagine that there's probably 10x more readers and that have had similar results. And then there's a very non-in-your-face, look, if you're interested in coaching, go here. This is what I do. So I've tried to make it all about helping myself back then not go through all of the crap that I went through in my physique struggle to get where I am now. It's like the mentor that I wish I had. That's kind of the approach that I've tried to take to it.
Okay. Which is probably why I get the feeling when I go to your website, like this is just right there. Like the information is there. There's nothing I have to wade through. I don't have to go and click a million links. I don't have to figure out what you're talking about. Probably your original book appealed to me that way as well. And maybe it's why a lot of us do what we do. Like with this podcast, I went through years and years, 4 decades of not knowing. And then it's like, I've learned from guys like Andy and others. Like it's just simple principles that you can apply, lift heavy, be consistent, whatever they are. And I want to help people get that shortcut. So it sounds like you're doing that, as is evidenced by the white space on your site and the clear information. So I love that.
Thank you.
When we talk about evidence-based fitness and nutrition science and research, some of that is where it can get very overwhelming. Even though there's great information and great work people are doing, how does that reconcile with the idea of providing simple, actionable advice? Like, why should people trust you that you are telling them the truth, so to speak, because you're cutting all that other fluff out?
Why should people trust me? That's a difficult question. May I come back to that?
Yeah, sure.
I think the key the science communicator that I am, I consider myself to be a layer down from my co-author, Eric Helms, who I know that you've had on as well. That's the co-author on the Muscle and Strength Pyramid books. He sits in between myself and the actual researchers. And yes, he's done research himself, but generally he's a science communicator, translating and explaining the latest studies. He's directly reading those himself, he and his colleagues. Between them, they will read something like 200-300. I may be underdoing it there, per month, scouring as many relevant journals as there are out there, and then putting out the most relevant information for us who are chasing our physique and strength and body comp goals. And so I learned from that as a fitness professional myself. Anyone else who's not a fitness professional is welcome to learn from that. But often that content is a little too heavy for the average person to dig into. And so I write for the person, I kind of serve as an intermediate layer, writing for now. It's, I'm going to turn 40 this year. People my age, generally they're married with kids. They're getting well on in their careers. They're usually doing really well there. They have given their, they give it all to their career and to their family. They've ended up letting their physical health slip. They're far from the prime that they had while they were in college, and they want to get that back, but they don't feel they have time, or they felt that they feel guilty about giving time to it. And when they have tried to give time to it, they've just kind of got sucked in by different fad diets or pills, potions, false promises of the fitness industry, and they tend to often they tend to, at some point, sadly, quit because they just get ripped off or tricked so much and think this isn't about me. Now, a certain portion of those who are left, they've kept on persevering. They come to my website, or your podcast, or people like us, and they're like, okay, well, this is information that is simple enough for me to apply. It's just if this is your situation, do this, do this, do this, do this. A little bit of course, contextual language here, explaining for different circumstances, but it's very much a how-to rather than too much of a science dump. And the way that I try to be, let's say, a little different is I try to help people understand the principles of nutrition and training and body comp, because it's mainly body comp. It's not so much on the powerlifting strength side, although they kind of go hand in hand, as you know. I try to help people to understand the frameworks that go behind the decisions that they can make, so that they're then free to make those decisions themselves, and they understand why a certain decision is the right decision for them at that time. So what do I mean by that? I'll give one quick example of a framework and then one example of how to apply it. A framework might be the nutrition pyramid that Eric popularized, I think, in a 2013 video on YouTube, talking about how adherence is obviously the foundational layer of the pyramid. And then as you ascend up the pyramid, things get less and less important. So after adherence, sticking to what you can actually do. Then we've got calorie balance. Then we've got macronutrient intake. Then micronutrients and water. After that, nutrient timing. This is your meal timing. And then after that, supplements. So this is a framework for thinking of the pyramid of importance. So if you're thinking about what supplements you should be taking, but ignoring calorie balance, well, this is putting the cart before the horse. This is getting things out of order, and you're unlikely to get to where you want to go. Now, given that this is the pyramid of importance, at certain phases, at certain points in our life, we may decide to try to implement all layers of this pyramid in as rigorous and as optimal, quote unquote, optimal way as possible. However, there will come times, let's say you get married, have kids, have a really busy time at work, where you are just totally unable to then have the perfectly spaced 4 meals with your optimal morning training session after your perfectly timed 1 hour before protein shake, because otherwise you'd be training fasted. And, you have to then know, okay, how far can I simplify things given my situation without really compromising my results, or by compromising my results by the minimal amount? Because when people don't know that, they get themselves into this all or nothing mentality, which is the key thing that I try to get clients to avoid. So I've been coaching now for over 12 years. If I see a client who is able to do what they can when they can, but accept when they fall short, but still do what they can, not just be like they have the effort mentality. I don't know what your policy is on swearing here, but they're like, I can't do this, so I'm not going to do any of it. There's a breakfast buffet. My family want to eat this breakfast buffet while I'm away. Normally I don't eat breakfast, so hell, I'm just going to enjoy this vacation and have my breakfast, and I have all of the ice creams, and everything goes to hell. If they understand where they can make compromises or make simplifications without really compromising their results, then that gives people freedom, and that's what I want.
Yeah, I think you explained that very well. from the context of having the framework, because adherence or consistency, we use words like that, and people do conflate that with always on the game, always doing what you have to do every day. And as soon as you mess up, it goes off the rails. So I like how you spoke to your audience, which is also a lot of my audience, and it's me, technically. People who are around 40, I'm 42, busy, they don't have much time. Let's get real. Like, this is reality, right? You're not going to, like you said, you're not going to work out at 5 a.m. every day, have your carb and protein before and after, have exactly everything lined up. So I like that. So you work with physique-focused men who are already lifting. So there's sort of a premise that they have some level of understanding or education about that coming in and working with, which is good, right? That's like you're carving, where do you need to be first before I work with you? So I actually want to focus just on the left side of that point just for a second, because on your site you say, hey, you can get a personal trainer. I don't work with people directly in person. It's an online thing. You have to be lifting. Do you have advice for people who want to seriously lift? They're lacking the information. And what kind of programming and resources should they follow to get to that point where you can help them? Hey, listeners, this is Philip Pape, and I'm excited to announce our upcoming, totally free 21-day challenge starting December 1st. It's called the Wits and Weights No Diet Holiday Body Recomp Challenge. This challenge is about learning how to achieve body recomposition. That's building muscle and losing fat at the same time without dieting or restriction throughout the holidays. I'll be giving you free videos, guides, and personalized coaching in a private group chat to help you enjoy the holidays while being satisfied and guilt-free. The kickoff call is Friday, November 17, and the link to enroll is in the show notes. No matter what episode you are listening to, don't worry. If you're hearing this after November 17, you can still register and get access to the replay and resources before the challenge starts on December 1st. Again, to join the Wits and Weights No Diet Holiday Body Recomp Challenge to build muscle and lose fat without dieting through the holidays, click the link in my show notes. Now back to the episode.
So I would like to think that those people could come to my website, read it, implement it, and know exactly what to do. The coaching is for a more specific niche, and part of that is marketing, and part of that is because that's what I'm good at, because that's what we are good at Ripbody. But they kind of have fed themselves over time, and it's become a self-fulfilling thing. So as I've niched down further and further, so it's like only people who lift, only men who are over this age, only people who agree to not use their phones when emailing, because we do everything over email, and people become incompetent when they're using their phones with email. It's just kind of become, we've got better and better and better at this niche and worse at everything else. But the website, I like to think of it as, day to day, when I'm introduced to people, I want to be able to say to them, oh yeah, just go to the website, and know that they can get what they need from there. So there's some simple programs on there. We've actually got the programs from the muscle and strength pyramids on there. We've got a few others for free as well. We've got some simple nutrition guidelines on there. We've got guides for form. We've developed some ourselves. Actually, I have a Japanese website as well, and with the Japanese team, we developed a product for how to bench, squat, and deadlift. But I've got some free guides on the website. That's ripbody.com/squat, /deadlift, /bench. And then those are all free. Eric Helms and his team at 3D Muscle Journey, they've got great resources. They've got something called their lifting library, which will teach you the form of pretty much all of the lifts that you'll find in the gym and how to execute them properly, which seems obvious, but it's something worth revisiting. Let's say if you're new, say every couple of months, and then after that, maybe every year or so, because you can forget. But I've also got a resources section, so rickbro.com/resources, and you can see my recommended resources, and then where for readers, and then also where I learn from. So yeah, that's what I'd recommend. And the reason I say that, I say my own stuff, I've kind of poured my heart and soul into that. So
sure.
It's really a natural thing. I can say, okay, my stuff, I can vouch for that. And then, there's so much other stuff that I could say, but, when you give people too many options.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I think in like one of my very first episodes on this podcast, I'm sure I mentioned among a very few select resources, one of them being like Starting Strength and some stuff by Greg Nuckols. And I think I mentioned your like 42 video lifting guide or whatever it is, 42, whatever it is, something like that, right? Because I do think it's important that people, start from where they're at, but if they know when to get to a certain point and take advantage of these other resources, they have to have these prerequisites in place. It's kind of like when people talk about just wanting to lose weight or lose fat. I'm like, well, are you training yet? No, what does it have to do with losing fat? I'm like, well, there's a big connection between body composition and training. So I think that's important. Going back real quick to the requirements you have, one of those is that people eat meat. Is that also just from the natural process of niching down, or is that a more specific thing because of the challenges of working with vegans and vegetarians, like on the protein side?
So this is going to sound like a weird one, but there was a time, I can basically remove it now. I would say when it's vegan, things get more complicated.
Yes.
Although if someone's vegetarian, it doesn't really matter. There was a time when I thought that it was a big deal, but it doesn't seem so anymore. Whether someone's protein source is going to be animal versus plant-based, as long as they're eating a sufficient amount of protein in total, then we're pretty much good. Or the research seems to show that they're pretty much good. So yeah, I could take that away.
There you go, man. So update this site. No, that's what I was wondering, because I've been interviewing guys and talking a lot about plant. I just talked to Eric Trexler too, because he's all plant-based and just really trying to understand that topic. And you're right. The more and more we find out, it is simple. Again, simple principles of just getting enough protein is the big part of the pyramid, right? The other stuff is gravy, as icing, if it's even necessary, for other things like nutrients or heart health or whatever. Cool.
Yeah,
so,
it's when like the kind of when you can peek behind the matrix and look at these, the different. How can I say? You've got the different mental maps. You've got the different layers. The principles here. You can kind of see. Okay, fat loss. What is that? In the simplest terms. Okay, you want to have a calorie deficit, which means that you're burning more than you are taking in, whether that's liquids or solids, drinks or food. And so then if you were to have roughly, in fact, I'm not even going to go that deep. I'm not even going to talk about the number of calories. So burn more than you take in. And then to tell your body to hang on to muscle mass, the next most important thing is to tell it to hang on to muscle mass with strength training, with some form of hard resistance training. That's hard enough to tell it that muscle that you have is important. And the more training experience you have, the harder you're going to need. The newer you are, the less you'll need. And then the next layer on that is going to be eating a sufficient amount of protein, getting in enough protein in the day in total. And then the spacing of that protein, the spacing of those calories and where those calories are coming from. Otherwise, that's all much, much, much lower down on the pyramid of much higher up on the pyramid of importance.
Much smaller. Yep.
It means, so much smaller, much less important. Sorry, the one thing I needed to mention there in terms of calories is losing weight at an appropriate rate. So this is in two ways. That's what you can sustain. And then it's at an appropriate rate for your current level of body fat. So if you are carrying a lot of body fat, you can get away with faster rates of weight loss than someone who's, say, sub 10% body fat and going to be stepping on a bodybuilding stage in a couple of months. for those people, they need to be very, very careful about their rate of body fat. So something between 0.5 and 1%. The sweet spot tends to be 0.75 for average folks, and then maybe about 0.5% for those who are, getting very, very lean. And then you can nudge up and down from there based on your mood, energy levels, how your sleep is going, hunger, etc.
Yeah. And that's where you start to get into the little extra corner cases that people ask all the questions about, right? Like, but what about me with this? What about this? But it still comes down to principles. So I like the idea of just starting from the basics and then, hey, have you got those down? Because if not, let's not even worry about the rest just yet. But before we get to fat loss, one question I wanted to pick your brain on, because I'm not sure I've seen the most clear answer on why this is the case. But when we talk about muscle building, and one concept I learned from you early on was stay in that muscle building phase for like 5, 6, 7 months, a decent amount of time. Don't do it for only 3 months. But break that down for this. Why is it important physiologically? Maybe it's neuromuscular, maybe it's hormones, something, when you build for 6 instead of 3 months.
Sure. So I'm not good at the science.
Okay.
In the same way that
however you want to explain it, I'm good.
Eric Helms is, Brad Schofield is, etc.
Yeah.
But in broad terms, when you if we back up for a second, when you're new to lifting, you're going to get a certain amount of muscle gain and fat loss at the same time. However, the more advanced you get, the harder it is to achieve both at the same time to any measurable degree. And when it's very hard to measure something, it's very hard to manage for it. And then it's very hard to stay motivated. And so you need to then choose between phases of fat loss and phases of weight gain with the goal of mainly muscle gain, or rather with the goal of muscle gain, which is unfortunately going to entail some fat regain, but that's just how it is. Now, in many cases, that's going to be obvious. People know whether they need to lean out or bulk up. And there are some cases where it's not. I've kind of written an article all about that. If you just go to rickbody.com/cut-or-bulk, I've tried to keep all the URLs as obvious as possible. So
that's a good one. That's a good one for the listener, actually. That's a go-to for sure.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. There's cut-or-bulk. I've tried to keep them simple so that people can just guess as they type things in. And then if it doesn't come up, then there's a search box. And they can just
Google it. It'll come up. It'll come up.
Yeah. Yeah. So then what you need to know is that, you're cycling between cut and bulk phases. But when you end a cut and transition into a bulk, your body, there are some hormonal changes that take place when we cut, and there are some hormonal changes that kind of reverse, and also some new ones that happen as we move into a calorie surplus. But there's a lag on the timing there. And because there's a lag on the timing there, you can't just switch from a cut to a bulk, do that for 3 months, and then switch straight back into a cut and think that you are having 3 months of pure, highly optimized muscle gain period, because your body just isn't in a state where it's charged to be gaining muscle just yet. It can take a few weeks. And so, and potentially longer, depending on how lean you got and how long your previous cut was. And so that's one thing. That's one reason why you want to have longer bulking periods than just, say, a short 3 months. The second is muscle gain is exceptionally slow. Let's say you're an intermediate lifter, you're gaining 0.75%, which would be good, actually. 0.75% of your body weight as muscle mass per month. Let's say that you could do that. That might be about a pound of muscle per month. If you were to gain, in the 2 months you have left there, 2 pounds of muscle, When you cut down again, because you're going to have to cut the fat off that you've gained, are you going to actually be able to notice that difference? Probably not, right? And then it's going to be very difficult to feel that that time that you've spent has been worth it. And so then it's going to have a big chip on your motivation. So you need to spend long enough that you give your body enough time to accrue enough muscle mass so that once you've cut back down again and you've revealed all that muscle mass after you've taken that cumulative fat gain off, you're looking at enough of a difference where you're like, yes, I've done it. Yeah, like.
And Andy ripped off like it was Superman, like, he just ripped off the shirt. Yeah.
That wasn't my intention, but I'll take it. Yeah, it's like, yeah, I feel that this was absolutely worth it. So you might say cut for, I don't know, depending on how much body fat you have, it could be 3 months, it could be 6 months. And then you're going to move into a bulk phase. And let's say you bulk for only like 4 or 5 months. And then you cut the fat off again. It potentially could take you just a couple of months, but let's say you dick around a bit and it takes you 3.5 months because you struggle to get back into it. Well, then now you've spent in that bulk and then cut, you've spent like 8.5 months and you've got maybe 4 pounds to show of muscle to show for it. And you can't really tell because measuring muscle mass is a really tricky thing. It benefits you to have longer bulk phases.
Yeah, I like go ahead. No.
And then the trick, of course, or the part where people get themselves in a mess is that they don't get lean enough before they bulk. And so they end their bulking phases, or gaining phases, if bulk is a scary word for you. They end their gaining phases too early because they start feeling too fat. And then, of course, they end up in that problem that I just said, where they don't feel that they've actually made a meaningful difference. So very often, or rather, one good way of thinking of it is that the bulk cut phase should be spent at the extremes, at the point where you're feeling on the bulk end, the end of the bulk end, slightly too fluffy, and on the end of the cut phase, slightly too lean for your comfort. And you try to just navigate between kind of in waves and between those two levels, so that you're never feeling so uncomfortable that you want or need to stop.
So much of what you said is psychological, right? Let's just be honest. Like only the first point was related to this lag of hormones getting out of metabolic adaptation, recovering, and moving past that. But the rest of it is so important. And I can attest to and I'm still figuring it out because I've only been doing this for like 3 or 4 years myself. And it's like, when I get lean, I'm like, am I lean enough? Is this good? I can see the 6-pack, but like not enough, maybe. Should I just start? But then at the same time, and you didn't mention this benefit, is I want to be eating a lot of food most of the year. Like, let's just be honest. I want to be in a bulk most of the year. And that's one benefit I tell people too. Just, do you want to be dieting all the time like you have in the past and then struggling, or just like 3-to-1, 4-to-1 ratio of being in a surplus? But the point about not being lean enough is good because I think you talk about in some of your content, like, if you first have a lot of weight to lose, you got to get that off and you get down to a certain point. Then you're in this range. Now, where's that range for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, this is Philip, and I hope you're enjoying this episode of Wits and Weights. If you're finding value in the content and want to stay up to date with all our latest episodes, be sure to hit the follow button on your favorite podcast platform. By following, you'll get notified whenever a new episode comes out, and you won't miss out on knowledge and strategies to level up your health and fitness. All right, let's get back to the episode. And before we get there, the muscle building rate of gain. So the evidence says, hey, 0.1 to 0.25% of your body weight per week, which always seemed pretty tight and precise to get to. And I know we both use Macrofactor now. It kind of helps. But I've seen you recommend higher than that for like newer lifters, right? Like 0.4%-ish, something like a 1.25 pound a month, something, or for
I don't actually think in terms of weeks. So I'm having you're making me do math.
Oh, sorry. So it's like 0.4 to 1% a month. There you go.
Yeah.
0.4 to 1% of What is your recommended rate of gain based on training age? Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, sure. So I work with guys. Most guys, by the time they come to a bulking phase, they're going to be somewhere between 140 and 200 pounds, depending on how tall they are, right? And their level of training experience, right? Say 130, sorry. It could be lower, actually, obviously, depending on height. Of course, you take the extremes of the height range here and the extremes of the level of lifting experience, and there are going to be outliers here. But let's say somewhere between 140 and 200 pounds. Practically, then, what that means is that the rate of gain that I would recommend is typically somewhere between 2 and 3 pounds per month. And this is because I don't tend to work with the really, really advanced lifters, and I don't tend to work with the completely new people. And that 2 to 3 pounds a month, this is something that is measurable and therefore manageable, and something that people can stay motivated for. Anything less than, say, 2 pounds a month or 0.5 pounds per week is going to be very hard to measure because, of course, of the fluctuations in weight from water, gut content, and glycogen changes, even if you are taking daily averages. And so what does that work out to? About somewhere between 1 and 1.5% of body weight. Sorry, somewhere between 1 and 2% of their body weight. And part of that is, you'll notice a difference there. You've got 0.4, 1% you said per month, right? And I'm talking about, well, somewhere
Double,
between
almost.
1 and 2% per month, which is double. And that's purposeful because I'm acknowledging that some of the weight that you're going to gain is going to be fat. And if you are to set your rate of weight gain at the maximum muscular potential, at the likely rate of muscle gain if you do everything right, well, I've never seen anyone only gain muscle. So we may as well set our calorie surplus higher so that we've got enough of a buffer there to maximize our potential muscle gain at that time. Yeah. So if you were to only try and gain a pound per month, and let's say that you could measure and manage for that, and technically, yes, you should be gaining a pound of muscle, well, you're probably only going to get half a pound of muscle and half a pound of fat anyway. So just bank on the fact that you're going to get half fat. If you do everything right, at the best case, half of it's going to be fat anyway, and plan for that and accept that. Now, the thing to say to yourself is like, look, just before, you were saying, am I lean enough? Well, one way of thinking about this, if you are in that range of what I just said, and you can maybe take a third off of this if you're smaller or you're a female. Once you're at the point where you think you can bulk, ask yourself, over the next 6 to 7 months, if I were to gain 10 pounds of body fat and 20 to 25 pounds overall, would I be okay with that? And if the answer is no, you may need to get leaner. And of course, you need to modify those numbers down if you are a smaller person. But for the guys I work with, that works out as a fair heuristic. And for some of them, they would not feel comfortable. They can just look back at their photos, previously, or their measurements, and they know. So then they know they need to get leaner. And if they feel that they can, because their hunger, fatigue, their levels are manageable, and their training is still going well enough, and their performance is still okay, then they'll continue with that. And the last thing, and then I'll shut up. The reason I say 25 pounds, even though I said 10 pounds of fat, and we were talking about a theoretical one-on-one. So the reason I said 25 and not 20 pounds there is because we're going to have anywhere from 2 to 5 pounds of water, gut content, and glycogen regain after
to overshoot.
They finish their cut. Yeah, exactly.
I love it, man. So this is again where it's like decision points. It's decision trees. At least the engineer in me enjoys that. Like if this, if this, this. If you're good gaining 25 pounds and 10 of that is fat, then you're lean enough, right? So my friend Carl, I hope he's listening. Actually, the episode with him just came out today, and he's bulking, and I think he can push it more. So listen to this right here, my man. And I might change my rate of gain and macro factor myself. Who knows? We'll see, and really push it. So body fat percentage is another aspect of this, right? Because you talk a lot about using photos, which is I'll say objective. Like we call it subjective, but in reality, it's something you can see change over time. I mean, at least that's my opinion. You also talk about using the Navy calculator, which I found is pretty good for trends. My question is, should we care about body fat percentage, really? Like the number, should we care? And if so, why are most methods pretty much horribly inaccurate, and are photos still the way to go? Is that your recommendation?
So I listened to your buddy Carl. I listened to that episode. Parts of it anyway. Uh-oh. And so I disagree with him on this one. Okay. Because he mentioned, we got some.
No, let's hear it. I don't like to call. I don't call out my guest. You know what I'm saying?
No. I'm not. I'm not knocking someone. One of the pitfalls of using a body fat percentage measurement device.
Oh, the Rempo device. Oh, yeah. Oh, I could have called him out on that. I hear what you're saying.
I assume so. Bioelectrical impedance analysis. I assume it was. Most of these home devices are. It's something where you step onto a scale. They've got some metal plates. It sends an electric current through your body, and it's not actually measuring body fat percentage. It's measuring the resistance of a current. It's then the impedance, and then based on some clever equations, it's then estimating your fat-free mass, and then based on your scale weight, it's then coming up with a number for an estimation of your body fat. Unfortunately, hydration status, how glycogen status, which is how many carbs we've eaten recently, and therefore how full our muscles are, how full our guts are with food, which is going to change not just whether we've just pooped, or a lot or a little, but also the types of foods that we've had, because we don't eat, well, most people don't eat the same thing every day. And so you're going to have fluctuations in these readings. And so the problem is, not only are these machines that we have access to, not only are they inaccurate, but they aren't necessarily consistent with their readings either. And so you can be 2% down one day, 2% up in 2 weeks' time, despite feeling and seeing that your shorts are physically looser. It can tell you that you've gained a couple of percentage points of body fat. And because people tend to look at, and of course, Carl is a pro. He knows that is impossible, and he knows that it must be an erroneous reading, but the vast majority of people don't. They have an idea. Their gut says, well, shit, that's not right. But they're like, no, there's a number on this expensive machine that I paid for, and all the marketing says is amazing. And therefore, I have definitely lost muscle and gained fat, is what they tell themselves. And then they get themselves into this mental spiral, and maybe they quit. And it's really sad. And so I never use any of these devices for clients. I don't even recommend they go for DEXAs. DEXA scan, it's expensive. It's a little better. Where these devices are useful is in assessing group averages, which is essential for research. But for the individual, I recommend that we don't use them. I recommend taking your weight each day and averaging it, and noting that at the end of the week, and then noting that across the weeks. Macrofactor will do that for you, which I know you're a fan of. But you can just literally just write that down in a notebook. It's and the math isn't hard, right? Or create a little spreadsheet.
Oh, and I nerd out on this, and people know it's 20-day exponential moving average. So put that in Excel, you're good to go.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I mean,
just that easy, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you could do that in your head. And then lost my train of thought. Damn it. Pick me up.
About using the photos. You were saying you could use the scale weight
tracking.
and then other measures. Yeah.
Yeah, so scale weight, note the averages if you want to do it all in your head. In fact, this is how I do it with clients. I don't use a moving average. I just have a look at their averages across the weeks, and then I know what their adherence to their diets were, because they note that in the spreadsheet as well. It's a percentage of their total calorie targets for the week. So if they go, say, 10% over, then they'll write 110%. If they were 5% under, they underate that week, it will be 95%. So I can see that. And then I've got kind of a report telling me like any occasions where they went off their diet. They maybe they had a birthday party or whatever. So then I know that timing compared with the numbers. So then I know whether they're likely to be a bit bloated on that day. I'll then have them with their body measurements. I get people to do it in 9 places. So their limbs, their limbs when flexed, their chest back measurement, and their waist, and 3 places on the stomach. So at the navel, and then 3 finger widths above the navel, and then three finger widths below the navel. And that's because fat loss tends to come top down, and doesn't come from everywhere at the same time. And so with those 2 things, with that combination of things, you can capture how your progress is going. And then with the photos, that's a good idea. I do get clients to take them every month. You could take them more often than that, but I wouldn't base any decisions on what you see in the photos more often than that. Data is really where I put the emphasis on when making decisions. And that's just because, photos, even with the same lighting, and the same time of day, it's a bit subjective, and our mind can play tricks on us. We may be slightly more pumped up from a particularly good session, or maybe you had a few more carbs and therefore our muscles are fuller. So I really like to use those scale weight averages and measurement points along with their nutrition adherence when assessing these things.
For sure. Yeah. And the more of this data you have, and it's not, once you get in the routine, it's not that complicated to make it just part of your habit. Those key data points all come together. If anyone is missing, you're kind of missing that piece of the puzzle, right? If a client, if their weight is not moving, well, is it really a plateau, or would their body measurements show their waist going down and they're, going through body recomp, things like that, right? You talked, one of your reels, you talked about scale weight. Sorry, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I didn't answer your question. And I'm sorry, forgive me for that. I have a terrible habit of this.
It's all good.
So before we come back to that, you asked me, like, do I recommend, is it important that people know their body fat percentage?
Right.
Not really. I think it's most important that directionally they know whether they're making progress towards their goal. But then, you can give descriptions around whether someone should bulk or cut. And as part of those descriptions, it can be useful to give people an idea of what they might look like when they're considering bulking, when they should consider cutting. And so for that reason, I've got an article, I'll just call it my body fat guide. It's body fat percentage pictures, compare your body fat level. So rippedbody.com/body-fat-guide. And then I've got a collection of what 7 to 9% looks like, what 10 to 11% looks like, what 12 to 14% looks like, 15, 17% looks like. It's all men, unfortunately, because these are all client photos over the years. But I've got, I think there are, I don't know, something like 50 photos in here of clients, so you can see what it's going to look like on different people at different heights,
right,
at different body fat percentages. So then you can compare and get an idea for yourself. And I should caveat, this is all based on my eye. So I'm just kind of giving you an idea of what I think this is like, but hopefully that's helpful when you pair it with like the should I cut or bulk guide and that kind of thing.
Sure.
But in terms of assessing your progress, no, absolutely don't need to know it. I just think it's a game that's going to that you can't win and it's going to lead to heartache.
It's true. It's true. All right. Yeah. And those physique photos are helpful, especially when you have people of different body types at the same body fat percentage can look different. And so you kind of find, where's my body type in there? And then you immediately realize how delusional you were about what body fat you thought you were.
Yeah. So essentially, like the golden rule is you are fatter than you think.
There you go.
And when you finish your first cut, you will have lesser muscle mass than you thought. Sorry, I haven't met a single person ever that breaks those rules.
So when you are in a cut, then let's good segue to this. There's conflicting information about certain things in a fat loss phase, like how to train, right? People think everything has to change in a fat loss phase dramatically. How to train, how do I use cardio? People get complicated with nonlinear dieting strategies. I'm actually doing a training on refeed days, so I understand like that's one of those things, most people don't need them, but some people will. What are some, I guess, questions or misconceptions that come up for you often during fat loss that people could really benefit hearing your perspective on? It could be hunger, it could be psychological stress, whatever comes to mind.
Well, so people talk a lot of shit on the internet and in podcasts, and surprise, surprise, right? And so then the questions that I get are highly varied. So instead of answering your question,
okay,
right?
That's good.
I'm instead going to change it as, what do I recommend that someone does? That'd be all right.
Sure, go for it, please.
Okay, so I've lost my chain of thought. God, remind me the question again.
Fat loss during a fat loss phase. Just what do you do? Because I was asking about training, cardio,
training. Yeah,
dieting.
of course.
Yeah.
So how should someone think about training? Well, you have fewer calories coming in, so your body has far less potential to create muscle while you are now in this calorie deficit. It's compromised. You risk going into a recovery deficit. So you can keep your training program that you used when you were bulking, but you need to be mindful that as you progress into your cut, you may start to feel unusually high levels of soreness. Your joints may start to get crankier than normal. You may start to, you probably will start to plateau and then potentially regress with your lifts. And when any one of those things happen, you could consider just tapering back the training volume a little. Now, you can do this on an individual lift basis, or you could do this globally. I think you should consider a mix of both of these. So let's say that you've worked up to, 5 sets of bench twice a week when you were bulking, and that was working really well. But as you are cutting, you now find yourself struggling. You find that your shoulders have started to get cranky, even though you haven't changed your form at all. You might consider for that exercise to reduce the number of sets that you do to 4 per session, so 8 per week. Again, this is just an example. And then the crankiness might resolve, and you may be able to maintain your strength better there. Now, let's say that you start to feel really tired. It's getting a drag, getting out of bed. You're kind of dreading going to the gym. You're sore everywhere. Well, in that case, you might consider just globally reducing volume everywhere. Not necessarily everywhere, but you might consider lopping off a set or 2 per movement per week. Actually, let's make it even simpler. You may consider slashing 1 set from each of your exercises, barring perhaps the isolation work. So your main compound movements in each session. That would just be one very simple way of going about it. This is the basis of how I tend to think about these things. the training program itself does not need to radically change from a cut to a bulk phase, because what your body needs hasn't really changed. You need to tell it to hold on to that muscle mass. And that signal to hold on to the muscle mass when you're in a calorie surplus is the same signal to grow. It's just the what you're fueling your body with, the amount is different, so it can't. And then when it comes to cardio, I would just say that is one way of addressing calorie balance. It tends to be a fairly inefficient method for doing so. And it's something that should be used sparingly, because it's much easier to control your mouth than it is to. It's much easier to not have the 400 calorie frappuccino than it is to spend 50 minutes running for the equivalent energy burn. If you're lucky, might be more than that. So while you can add cardio in, do it sparingly. And one thing, I know that you're a fan of this as well, or I believe you're a fan of this as well. It's just keeping up a minimum step count if you can, as you cut, just so that your overall energy expenditure is kind of maintained. Because when we are in a calorie deficit, we're in an energy deficit, we tend to get lazier. We're not necessarily aware of it. Our step counts can plummet, and then that can force us to reduce food even further and further. So by purposefully keeping your step count up, it can really help make the diet more manageable, because you're able to continue to eat more as the diet progresses.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I mean, some people don't realize how much of an impact that can have. And it happens pretty quickly. At least I've seen with some clients how just upping that step count within a week, you start to see a response. Okay, you have a hard stop, because I know time flew. This was a good conversation. It's been an hour, so maybe just one more question or two.
Sure.
Yeah,
sure.
I wanted to ask you, what are you most proud of in your coaching career?
So I get pride. Pride's a tricky one. I like to think that the website is a good thing. I'm proud of the website because there are many ways that I could have sold out to have many millions of dollars in the bank, but I chose not to, because I wanted to do a good thing. And that's important to me. I want people to stumble across it and, just feel grateful for it, and to be one of the voices in the industry that, one of the few people in our corner of the industry that's, really doing right by people. Now, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of people that are good in this industry. It's just that the charlatans, the bad ones, they tend to stick out, right? Just because of how the algorithms work. So I think if I think about my career generally, it's probably just the website and trying to put out good quality information and not cluttering it up, and then the impact that has. Because, while I'm sleeping, that is positively impacting many people's lives and continues to do so. So it's not really about who I've worked with or what I've done while working with people. It's about what the website is able to do. And then as a product of that, a small percentage of people decide to click the coaching page, read through, decide that it's for them, and then start a conversation and maybe hire me. And it's been a pleasure and honor to work with so many people. So it's all of that combined, really.
I love that answer, right? Because if you just said the website, right, people want to know more, because it's just this thing out there that you've built, right? But it reminds me of a science fiction book I read years ago where humanity was going to collapse, and they had to figure out how to encode all of our knowledge. And they're like, what's the one medium we can put it in? And it was stone, like carving on stone and putting it on Pluto or something, right? And a website, as mundane as it sounds, like you've put your heart and soul into it, and there's a level of integrity there. You said you want people to feel grateful, and I'm sure they thank you all the time, and I do as well. So you've been making that impact. Love that answer, man.
It's not that I want people to feel grateful. I know that's not what you meant, but like
that's what I wrote on my notes that you said. I probably miswrote it. Sorry.
No, I want people to feel that this is something that they can trust. They can put it into practice. That they can just use it and not need to pay anything. And I think this just puts out, good vibes in the world, and those things come back. And then worst case, if everything goes tits up, I've got beer credits in many different cities around the world, and then potentially even couches to sleep on. So
well, still they're gonna have gratitude because they were able to get that from your website. So that's all I'm gonna say, whether you are saying that or not. All right. So second to last question. You knew this was coming. Is there any question you wish I had asked, and what is your answer?
No, I think you've done a great job. I said at the start of this, off the air, like you're a good interviewer. You know me, and you knew what to ask. And there's nothing.
Cool, appreciate it. That's a good enough answer for me. Where do you want listeners to find your work? In case we didn't talk about your website enough, right?
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah,
no, I don't mean that as a dig at all. I'm just saying people should know by now. Ripbody.com. But is there anywhere else?
Exactly, that's it. If you want to. Follow along on Instagram. It's Andy_ripped_body. But the detailed stuff is all on it's all on the website. The Instagram is some short reels. I try to put the detailed information I have on the site into short reel form, but it's really tricky, and I much prefer writing. And then in the stories, it's more just kind of like life in Japan and kind of what I do day to day here. So,
yeah. No, the reels are good because they're just, how to. Every day it's like a how to, right? You had one recently about weight fluctuations and how to experiment on yourself to see how much it fluctuates, right? Like eat this way, see how much it fluctuates. Weigh yourself like before and after bed, see how much it fluctuates. So good stuff like that. All right, website, IG, I'm going to add all the links, of course, in the show notes. I appreciate everything. I appreciate your time and also listening to my show ahead of time. That's an honor to me. It was cool to have you on, so thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you. And thank you, listeners, for taking the time.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Wits and Weights. If you found value in today's episode and know someone else who's looking to level up their wits or weights, please take a moment to share this episode with them. And make sure to hit the follow button in your podcast platform right now to catch the next episode. Until then, stay strong.